They called it a small mistake when they signed my house away. I called it something else, and so did the judge. The day they kicked me out of my house, Vanessa handed me an old coat and said, "Lucky you ain't dead yet, or we'd have to pay for a funeral, too." That coat still smelled like mothballs and lemon disinfectant. It was the one I used to wear when I picked up groceries during snowstorms. They had stuffed it in a trash bag months ago, said it was too embarrassing to hang near their Patagonia jackets. Now they were giving it back like a parting gift, as if I was a guest who had overstayed her welcome. I stood on the porch of the home I had lived in for 43 years, clutching that coat like it was the only proof I still existed. Snow had started to fall again. The wind slapped my cheeks raw. I could barely feel my toes. Vanessa didn't wait for a goodbye. She turned on her heel, heels clicking against the hardwood I paid to install, and disappeared into the warm light of what used to be my living room. Through the frosted window I saw my son Rick standing beside her, arms crossed. He wasn't angry, he wasn't sad. He looked relieved. That hurt more than the cold. A neighbor across the street saw me out there and came over, concerned. "Mrs. Holloway, are you locked out?" Rick opened the door just a sliver and shouted over, "Nah, she's fine, she signed everything. Voluntarily, she wanted to move out. Said it was too loud here." He looked at me when he said that, not with guilt, but with the smugness of someone who thinks they've won. "Old folks sign things all the time," he added with a shrug. "If you can't read, don't blame the paper." That sentence. I will never forget that sentence. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. Now where was I? I did not want to cry in front of my neighbor. I did not want her pity. So I pulled that coat tighter and said, "I just need a moment." Then I walked down the porch steps, slow and stiff, each one feeling like a betrayal. I had painted those steps myself. Twice, when Rick was in high school and I could still climb a ladder without my knees yelling back. They let the door slam behind me, like I was a stranger who had wandered too close. Let me tell you something about that house. I bought it with my husband Walter in 1979, after he came home from the paper mill with enough savings to put down a deposit. We chose that house because it had 3 bedrooms, a yard for our son, and a magnolia tree that bloomed like magic in spring. I cooked Sunday dinners in that kitchen for decades. I rocked Rick to sleep in the back bedroom with the yellow wallpaper. I bathed his dog in the utility sink when he was too scared to do it himself. When Walter died, it felt like the walls leaned in closer, protecting me. That house held me through the silence, through the birthdays I spent alone, through arthritis and long winters. It was more than wood and nails. It was my witness, my memory, my shield. And just like that, they took it from me. I had moved in with Rick and Vanessa after my second hip surgery. They said they'd take care of me, until I was back on my feet. I should have known better when Vanessa started calling it her kitchen and her master bedroom, even though I was the one still paying the property taxes from my pension. I didn't want to cause trouble. I thought maybe it was just stress. Maybe they needed to feel in control. So I stayed quiet. I did what most mothers do. I convinced myself it was love wearing an unkind face. But that morning, standing outside in the cold, I knew better. They had waited until my body was slower and my eyesight was weaker. They had chosen their moment. Vanessa poured me chamomile tea while Rick brought out a folder with documents. Said they were routine paperwork. Said it was for the bank and that I just needed to sign to update the records. He laughed when I squinted at the small print. "Mom, it's not a contract for your soul, it's a signature." I signed because I trusted my son. That was my sin. Later that week, my name vanished from everything. The bank account, the mailbox, the deed. Suddenly the Wi-Fi password changed and no one told me. My TV remote disappeared. I was told to keep the volume low, like a guest. My favorite chair was moved to the garage. Then came the real insult. Vanessa came into my room with a tape measure. She was measuring for a treadmill. "Once you're out, we're putting in a wellness space," she said, as if I were a box being delivered, not a person being displaced. I stared at her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip those stupid measuring tapes from her fake manicured hands and tell her I changed her diapers when she had that surgery she now pretends never happened. But I didn't, because I was raised to believe that silence is sometimes the sharpest weapon. Rick called a family meeting 2 nights later. Said he and Vanessa talked to a consultant and decided it was best if I moved out. "It'll be good for you," he said, "a fresh start." They offered to drop me off at a friend's place. They did not ask where I would sleep, or eat, or keep warm. And now, standing in the driveway, with snow in my shoes and betrayal thick in my throat, I realized the truth. They did not make a mistake. They made a decision. And I was about to make one too. Because sometimes, revenge does not need shouting. It only needs remembering. And I remember everything. They say a mother's love is unconditional, but they forget, so is her memory. The first time Rick ever looked at me like I was something disposable, not someone who carried him through 20 hours of labor, was the day I said no to a dream. He came to me on a Sunday afternoon, clutching a spiral-bound notebook full of sketches and numbers and big plans. He had that look, wide eyes, fast words, the kind of energy he used to get before a big high school debate. "Ma," he said, "I need 50 grand. Just to start, I've got it all mapped out. A fusion gastropub, farm to table with a Midwestern twist. It'll be huge. $50,000. He said it like he was asking for a ride to the airport. I listened to every word. I nodded. I even smiled a little when he said he wanted to name one of the sandwiches after me, the Holloway. But when he finished, I took a breath, looked him in the eye, and told him the truth. "I cannot give you that, Rick. Not from my pension, not from the mortgage, not from the emergency fund your father and I worked 30 years to build." His face went pale, then red, then something worse, flat. "You don't believe in me," he said. "I believe in you more than you know," I told him. "But I also believe in rent, and medicine, and not gambling everything on something we can't afford to lose." He walked out that night and didn't call me for 3 weeks. When he finally did, his voice was stiff. "Just wanted to let you know, I'm trying again, with investors who actually care about my future." That was the beginning. From that point on, I wasn't his mother. I was a brick wall he resented. Vanessa didn't help. If Rick saw me as a failed bank, Vanessa saw me as a smudge on her glass house. She married him, wearing a dress that cost more than our first car, then moved into my home like it was a hotel suite. I had offered them the upstairs to get started. They took the whole house. She never said thank you. Only corrections. "Can we replace this carpet? This furniture feels old." "Do you always use this kind of salt?" Little things at first. Harmless, almost humorous. Then she started labeling things in the fridge with her initials, hiding the good coffee, bringing her mother over and calling her Mom in front of me. Once while folding laundry in the basement, I overheard her on the phone. "I didn't marry into poverty. I married Rick. Not his mothball-scented past." She laughed. I didn't. The year Walter died, I tried to make peace. I invited them to help plan the funeral. Vanessa looked at me and said, "I think it's better if we keep things light. No black suits. Maybe some jazz." Walter wasn't exactly the sentimental type, was he? She was wearing white when she said that. At the service, I didn't cry. Not because I felt nothing, but because I had been mourning Walter long before he passed. His mind had started slipping years earlier, and every month I lost a piece of him to the silence. When he finally went, it was like watching a candle go out in a room that had already gone dark. But Vanessa didn't see that. She whispered loud enough for others to hear. "No tears, no heart." She leaned in to one of her friends and added, "Cold runs in the family." Rick never defended me. He stood beside her in his tailored suit, nodded at the eulogy, and left me to sit alone with a folded flag and a funeral bill. The worst part? I still cooked them dinner that night. I still made chicken pot pie from scratch and set the table for 3, because I thought love was service. I thought dignity meant staying quiet. But silence only made them bolder. When Vanessa got pregnant, I offered to take care of everything so she could rest. For 5 years, I raised their daughter, my granddaughter, while they focused on building stability. That was their term. My term was changing diapers at 72, skipping book club and watching cartoons instead of the news. I gave them my time, my home, my sleep. And when they were finally stable, they rebranded me. I became the burden. The room I slept in became the future nursery. My rocking chair became too creaky for the aesthetic. Vanessa said, half joking, "We might need to Marie Kondo the house soon." She meant me. One morning, I found a real estate brochure on the counter, circled in red ink. It was for a charming starter home for retirees. In bold letters, senior-friendly neighborhood, no stairs. Vanessa smiled when I picked it up. "Just some options. You know, when you're ready to simplify," I wanted to scream, but I didn't, again. I took the brochure, folded it neatly, and put it in my Bible, right between the pages on Proverbs and justice. But it was not just the big betrayals, it was the slow erasure. They stopped inviting me to dinner with their friends. Rick would say, "It's just going to be loud, you wouldn't like it." They bought a new dining table with only 6 chairs when we used to have 8. When they remodeled the kitchen, they removed the cabinet where I kept all my spices and cookbooks. Just said it was clutter. They said I should write down my recipes before I forgot them. I have not forgotten a single one. They painted over the wall where Rick had marked his height as a child. Just covered it up like it never happened. That was when I realized they were not angry at me. They were ashamed of me. Ashamed of where they came from. Ashamed of the woman who made it all possible. Ashamed of the sacrifices that were too messy to fit in their modern lives. The same woman who gave birth in that hospital, who paid for braces, who stitched Halloween costumes and bought second-hand so they could have new. Now I was a reminder, a flaw, a ghost. That is what Vanessa called me once, after I walked in on her reorganizing my closet. "You move too quiet," she said, "like a ghost. We never know when you're around." I nodded. The day Rick brought me the folder, it was raining, soft and steady, like the sky was holding its breath. He said it casually, like he was offering me a cookie after dinner. "Mom, I just need you to sign a few forms. Bank stuff, updating some joint access points. Makes everything easier for taxes." He called it joint, like I still belonged in the equation. I was in my slippers. I had just finished washing dishes, hands still pruny from hot water. Vanessa was upstairs, humming. She had started playing spa music through the whole house ever since she found a diffuser oil called Serenity. I sat down at the table, the same table I used to help Rick with his math homework on. He laid out 3 sheets of paper and pointed to the lines marked with yellow flags. "Here, here, and here," he said, tapping them like a magician guiding a trick. "Do I need to read it?" I asked, not because I was suspicious, but because I was tired. He smiled, not warmly, not cruelly, just thin. "It's boring, Ma. Legal mumbo-jumbo. You trust me, right?" He knew I did. That was his trick. He never needed to yell to win. He just needed to speak with the voice I gave him, the one I used to read him bedtime stories with. "Vanessa made you tea," he added, almost as an afterthought. She slid it across the table like a waitress at closing time. "Chamomile. My favorite." It was already steeped, the bag removed. That meant I could not see how strong it was, could not measure how long it had been sitting. I sipped. It was sweet. Too sweet. She watched me drink, hands folded, nails perfectly buffed and painted in the same sterile pink as the bathroom tile she insisted on importing from Italy. After a few minutes, the words on the paper began to blur. My eyes were open, but the room got thick around the edges. The air felt like syrup. I do not remember signing. I only remember waking up with a dry mouth and a ringing in my ears. The folder was gone. My teacup was rinsed and placed in the dishwasher. Rick was on the phone in the living room. He was laughing. He said, "All done. Should clear in 90 days. Yeah, no, she had no idea, just smiled and signed. He paused, then added, "Easiest thing I've ever done." I sat up straighter, tried to stand, but my legs shook. They said it was low blood sugar. They gave me juice and told me to rest. They shelved me like clutter in the basement, alive, but no longer counted. "Somewhere else," I repeated slowly. He nodded like it was normal. Then he smiled. "You've got options, Ma. Don't make this harder than it has to be." And just like that, I understood. I was no longer a mother. I was a signed-away inconvenience. They moved fast after that. Boxes of my things were organized into plastic bins and pushed into the garage. My knitting basket disappeared. My Bible was found in the donation pile. The family photo wall became a gallery of abstract prints from Etsy. They changed the Wi-Fi password. They changed the locks. They changed me. Or they thought they did. I learned the heat in the laundry room only worked for 15 minutes at a time. I kept a space heater that tripped the circuit whenever Vanessa turned on her curling iron. I learned to boil water in the dark, to wash quietly, to cry without making a sound. One night, when the pipes groaned in the walls and the wind howled against the glass, I heard Vanessa say to Rick, "It will be so much nicer when it's just us. Clean lines, no clutter, no ghosts." Ghosts. That is what I had become. To them, I was already gone, but I was not. And they were wrong about one thing. I did read that paper, not with my eyes, but with my bones, with the ache in my hip that told me something sacred had been stolen, with the sting in my chest that knew the tea was not kindness, it was strategy, with the silence I had learned to wield like a blade. They thought betrayal came quietly, but they forgot one thing about old women. We remember. And sometimes remembering is louder than screaming. That night, I laid in bed beside the dryer, hands folded across my chest like the dead, but I was not dead. I was waiting. Waiting for winter to thaw, waiting for words to become weapons, waiting for their small mistake to become something else entirely, something with teeth, something with a verdict. Because justice is patient, and so am I. The photo wall was the first to go. I came upstairs one morning, as I always did, quietly and early, to warm up some milk for my arthritis. That wall by the hallway, once filled with framed pictures of Rick's childhood, our wedding portrait, one or two faded snapshots from Walter's days at the mill, was bare. In their place were 6 large canvas prints of Vanessa's family. Her mother in a lavender pantsuit, her sister holding a wine glass by a pool, a posed Christmas photo with coordinated sweaters, not a single picture of Rick as a boy, not a single trace of me. I stood there in my slippers, staring, not saying a word. Vanessa walked by with her morning smoothie and caught my gaze. She didn't flinch, just said, "We needed something more modern, clean, cohesive." Then she added with a smile, "Besides, you can keep your photos in my new home." The fridge came next. They cleared out all my containers, my leftover soups, my jars of home-pickled carrots, the cornbread I always made on Sundays, and replaced them with labeled bins. Rick's snacks, Vanessa's vitamins, meal prep. They left me a small plastic drawer marked M. It had 3 hard-boiled eggs and a carton of almond milk. "Let us know if you need anything else," Vanessa said, breezing by with her phone in hand. When I tried to cook dinner one evening, she stopped me at the stove. "Oh, no," she said, wrinkling her nose. "That smell, it just lingers, doesn't it?" It was chicken stew, the same stew Rick used to beg for every week in high school. She waved her hand and said, "We're switching to induction, less grease, more controlled." They replaced the stovetop with a glass panel that beeped every time I touched it wrong. They moved all my pots to a high shelf I could not reach. The only pan they left in reach was a single egg pan, warped and old. I was allowed to use the microwave, but only during non-peak hours. They installed smart lights. Every evening at 9, the lights in the laundry room dimmed automatically, to rest mode. The app was on Vanessa's phone. I asked once if we could change the setting. She said, "You'll get used to it. It's good for melatonin." I wanted to laugh. I hadn't slept through the night since they took my room. I started walking more, just to get out of the house. Once I slipped on the driveway and scraped my knee. Rick watched from the window, sipping his protein shake. He didn't come out. When I came back inside bleeding, he looked up and said, "You should be more careful." No bandage, no question, just that. They hosted a dinner party the following week. Rick's old college friends, most of whom I had met when they were pimply and broke and sneaking beers from my garage, now they wore smartwatches and talked about crypto. Vanessa made risotto and told everyone the house had good bones but terrible taste until we gutted it. Someone asked about me. "Oh," she said, waving vaguely, "she's still around, keeps to herself." That night, as guests arrived, Vanessa came into the laundry room holding a scarf and a coat. "It's snowing," she said. "Would you mind stepping out for a while? We're keeping it adults only tonight. I blinked. It's 20 degrees. We'll turn the porch heater on. She opened the door and gestured, like she was holding it for a delivery driver. I stepped outside. She locked the door behind me. For 3 hours I sat on the patio furniture, wrapped in a coat too thin, hands trembling, breath fogging the air. I heard laughter inside. Music. Toasts. Someone sang off-key. Someone else told a joke and got the whole room roaring. No one came to check. No one opened the door. When the last guest left and Vanessa finally let me back in, she barely looked at me. "Sorry," she said flatly. "Just didn't want guests to feel uncomfortable. You tend to hover." "Hover? You move too quietly. It's unsettling." I said nothing. Because I had learned something by then. Silence made them careless. Rick came to me 2 days later, smiling. "Mom, I'm thinking of starting a podcast, something about home ownership. You know, how to build equity, how to make smart generational decisions, maybe even get a brand deal." He said it like I was not the very foundation of that house, like my entire existence was not the reason he had something to stand on. He tapped the table and said, "Generational wealth, right?" I stared at him, and something inside me broke. But not in the way they wanted. It did not collapse. It cracked open. They had stripped away every surface, my photos, my kitchen, my name on the deed, but they could not strip what they could not see, my memory, my worth, my rage. At dinner that night, Vanessa said it outright. "We've been talking," she began, cutting her steak with robotic precision, "and we feel it's time to streamline the house. Make it cleaner, brighter, less cluttered." She didn't look at me when she said it. I was the clutter. Rick nodded. "Minimalism is in. It's better for focus," Vanessa added, "and for mental clarity. No offense, Marlene, but some of your things, they carry energy. Old energy." I looked down at my plate. They had given me steamed cauliflower and a plain chicken breast. Vanessa had plated hers with microgreens and imported sea salt. I used to be the one who taught her to cook. Now, I was told to clean up early and try not to make too much noise with the dishes. She followed me into the kitchen and whispered, "I do not want my guests seeing an old shadow lingering around. You understand, right?" I turned to her slowly. "A shadow?" She tilted her head, feigning sympathy. "You're still here, but it's like you're not. It's sad, really. Maybe it's time to find somewhere you're visible." That was the moment. Not when they took my name off the deed, not when they shoved me into a basement, but when they decided I was no longer human, that I was furniture, that I was dust, that I was a ghost. "People without property," Vanessa said once, glass of wine in hand, "should not get to dictate anything. That's just how the world works." I stood at the sink that night, the water running over my hands, and thought about that sentence. People without property have no voice. I dried my hands, turned off the faucet, and started planning how to get mine back. People think silence means surrender, but in my world, silence means strategy. After that night in the kitchen, after Vanessa called me a shadow, I went back to the laundry room, shut the door quietly, and sat down on the bed they had wedged between the water heater and the dryer. I did not cry. I did not speak. I simply reached under the mattress and pulled out the one thing they had forgotten I owned. My old flip phone. It was an outdated thing. I used to keep it in my drawer in case the internet went out or the power was cut. Rick told me it was useless, that everything is digital now, and offered to recycle it for me. I said no, and he shrugged, assuming I was just sentimental. He underestimated me. The phone had no service anymore, but it still turned on, and most importantly, it still recorded audio. That night, I turned on the recorder, slipped the phone under the laundry basket, and let it listen. To everything. Vanessa's voice echoed down the hallway as she laughed about the old bat still using fabric softener. Rick's chuckle followed. They had gotten comfortable. They had forgotten I was listening because they had decided I no longer mattered. Perfect. Each night after that, I would let the phone run. I would place it under chairs, behind plant pots, tucked between throw pillows. And I started to build a library, a record of the truth they thought no one would hear. But recordings were not enough. I needed proof stronger than sound. So I dug into the one place they never looked, The old metal trunk beneath the basement stairs. It had my wedding dress, Walter's military papers, some family photos, and a bundle of letters tied together with blue ribbon. I knew exactly what I was looking for. Elijah Ramirez. He had been one of my brightest students back in the days when I still taught 6th grade English at Jefferson Elementary. He was sharp, thoughtful, and always hungry for more than what the classroom gave him. I remember once he brought me a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird and said, "Mrs. Holloway, I want to learn how to speak like Atticus." He did, and he became a lawyer. 12 years ago, after my husband passed, and I started worrying about what would happen to the house if I got sick, Elijah had helped me set up a special protective trust, one designed for retired educators like myself. It was his idea, actually. "We make sure your property is legally insulated," he had told me, "so no one, not even family, can move your name without full consent and a sanity check from a court-approved physician." I signed the documents, we filed them, I stored the certified copies in that trunk, where no one ever bothered to look. I opened the envelope now with trembling hands. Still there. Still valid. The house was not mine anymore on paper, but the trust still was, and as long as I could prove the signature transfer was coerced, fraudulent, or obtained without full capacity, that house was still mine in the eyes of the law. I called Elijah the next morning, from the local library's phone. He picked up on the second ring. "Marlene Holloway," he said, his voice rich and calm. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you again." I choked up. "You remember me? You're the reason I passed the bar exam," he said. "Every time I wanted to quit, I heard your voice in my head telling me, 'Finish what you start.'" I smiled, and for the first time in months I felt seen. We met that afternoon in a cafe 30 miles away, far enough that Rick and Vanessa would never wander in. I laid everything out. The recordings, the folder, the fake paperwork, the tea incident, the eviction, and finally, the trust document, still sealed with its official stamp. Elijah read it all without interrupting. When he finished, he leaned back, steepled his fingers, and said, "Vanessa did not know about this, did she?" "No," I said. "And she doesn't know that I know?" He smiled. A slow, quiet smile. "Good," he said. "Then we have the element of surprise." I paused. "There's one more thing you should know." He raised an eyebrow. "Vanessa," I said. "She was married before, briefly." "I know," he said. "To me." I blinked. Elijah chuckled. "It did not last long. She left me after 6 months, said she wanted someone who thought bigger. Translation, someone with a bigger bank account. She never bothered to learn what I was building." "She said you were too small town," I whispered. "I was," he said, "until I stopped listening to her." I looked at him, and something shifted between us. Not romance, not nostalgia, but a shared understanding of what it meant to be discarded and underestimated. He leaned forward. "Here's what we do. We gather more evidence, build a timeline, medical records, proving your mental fitness, witnesses, neighbors, friends. Then, when the time is right, we file a quiet title action and move for injunction." He paused. "And then, we let them learn what it feels like to be erased." It was the first time in months that I felt like Marlene again. Not Mom, not the old woman in the basement, not the shadow. Just me. Over the next 2 weeks, I documented everything. Vanessa's voice mocking me, Rick's admission that I had no clue what she signed, even a conversation where they joked about how easy it was to manipulate me. "She's so desperate to belong," Vanessa said. "It's like stealing candy from a saint." I kept it all. I got a full physical, clean bill of health, sharp mind, clear diagnosis. My neighbor, bless her, wrote a statement saying she'd seen them move me out, heard them call me dead weight. And all the while, I kept smiling at the breakfast table, kept washing dishes, kept nodding at their conversations like nothing was wrong. Until one night, Rick joked, "You know, Ma, if you wanted to disappear so badly, you should have just left the door open." I stood up, looked him in the eye, and for the first time in months, I said, "You're right, Rick. I should have." Then I walked to the door, opened it wide, and let the cold wind in. Not for myself, but for what was coming next, because they thought I had disappeared. But I was only gathering, and soon everything they stole would come home. To me. Sometimes the best weapon is pretending not to have one. That week, I became forgetful, or at least, that is what they thought. I asked questions I already knew the answers to. I stared at the walls like I was lost. I let my tea go cold and said things like, "Oh dear, I've forgotten the day again." Vanessa loved it. She told Rick I was slipping faster now and started Googling assisted living facilities between Pilates classes. I heard her on the phone one evening. "It's time." She doesn't even know where the microwave is anymore. Funny, I had hidden the microwave manual in her yoga mat tube the day before. Everything was intentional. Every moment of confusion, every blank stare was a string I pulled, and every time they revealed more. I set the trap on a Wednesday morning while Vanessa was doing her weekly budget in the sunroom. I brought her a glass of water and sat across from her, knitting needles in hand. "Vanessa," I asked sweetly, "how did you and Rick make my name go away so fast?" She looked up, startled, then smirked. "Well," she said, closing her laptop, "we had help. That friend of Rick's, Tommy, he's in real estate, walked us through the whole thing. Simple." "Oh," I said, nodding. "I thought deeds took longer." "Only if you ask too many questions," she said. "Most people just sign." I mused. "Like me." She tilted her head, eyes squinting. "Exactly." Later that afternoon, I sat with Rick in the kitchen, sipping weak coffee from a chipped mug. "Rick," I said, "remember that paperwork? The bank thing?" He glanced at his phone. "Yeah? It was funny," I said. "All those little yellow flags. How did you get my name off so quickly?" He laughed. "Come on, Ma. You didn't even read it. It was like taking candy from a baby." "Or a grandma," I added, smiling. He laughed harder. "Exactly." I recorded that entire conversation. The phone was tucked into the towel drawer, propped up by potholders, clear as day. The next day, I upped the act. I walked into the kitchen, stared at the fridge, and asked, "Do I still live here?" Vanessa looked at me like I was a stray cat. "You're in the laundry room, Marlene." "No, I mean, is my name still on the house?" She didn't hesitate. "Nope. But don't worry, it was just a small mistake. Everyone signs something they regret." She actually said that, a small mistake. It was the line I needed, the title of the play, the banner under which their empire would crumble. I excused myself to the bathroom and texted Elijah from the old flip phone. "Got it. Full confession. We'll email files tonight." He responded instantly. "You're brilliant." Back in the laundry room, I copied every recording to a flash drive I kept hidden inside a hollowed-out Bible on the shelf. The irony was almost sinful. The chapter it lived in? Proverbs. Each night I emailed Elijah 2 files at a time, labeled cleanly. Date, time, subject. He built the case like a cathedral, slow, strong, sacred. One morning, I found Vanessa at the mirror plucking her eyebrows. I paused in the doorway and said, "I hope you never lose your reflection." She scoffed. "What kind of weird ghost comment is that?" "Just thinking," I said. "Some people look in the mirror and only see what they took, not who they took it from." She went back to plucking, unbothered. The last straw came when they tried to sell the house. I overheard the call through the vent in the laundry room. Rick was talking to a realtor. "Yeah," he said, "the paperwork's clean. We already moved the old woman out, just waiting on the staging team." The next day, I confronted them at dinner. I waited until dessert, sugar-free pudding cups, because Vanessa said I could not be trusted with real sugar anymore. I peeled mine slowly, took a bite, and said, "Are you selling the house?" Rick froze. Vanessa didn't. She smiled. "We're exploring options." I nodded. "And where will I go?" Rick shrugged. "We'll help you transition, maybe." "Green Pines, they have good reviews." "Do they?" "Better than you'd think." "Ugh," I said. "Will they let me bring my photos? My books?" Vanessa laughed. "It's a retirement home, Marlene, not exile. You'll be fine." "Exile," I repeated. "That's a strong word." "You're being dramatic," she said. "It's not like we kicked you out. You agreed to everything." "Right," I said, pushing the empty cup away. "Just paperwork, just a signature, just a mistake." Rick nodded. "Exactly." I stood, looked them both in the eye, and said softly, "You've made so many mistakes, and I've recorded every one." The silence that followed was so loud I could hear the fridge humming. Vanessa blinked. "What?" I didn't answer. I walked to the bathroom, pulled out the red lipstick I had hidden in the cabinet, and wrote one sentence on the mirror. The law does not protect the kind, but the kind can still use the law. Then I packed my bag. 3 outfits, my Bible, my flash drive, and the coat Vanessa gave me the day she kicked me out. This time I walked out on my own. This time I closed the door behind me. This time I smiled. Because the next door that would open would not be theirs. It would be a courtroom, and they would not be the ones writing on mirrors. They would be looking into them, wondering when exactly it all slipped away. And I would be there. Not as a ghost, not as a shadow, but as the woman they forgot could still burn everything down with nothing more than memory and truth. The courthouse was colder than I expected. Not cold like the snow outside, but sterile. Heavy, like a room full of old secrets waiting to be cracked open. I wore my Sunday coat, the one Walter gave me on our 30th anniversary. It was a little tight in the shoulders now, but the deep blue still held strong. I brushed off the lapels before I walked in. Elijah was already inside, setting up the evidence. Calm, sharp, unreadable. He greeted me with a nod, no words. We had said everything that needed saying already. Across the aisle, Rick sat stiffly in a gray suit too new for his personality. Vanessa was beside him, her heels too high, her lip color too bright for a courtroom. She scanned the room, casual at first, then froze when her eyes landed on Elijah. I saw it hit her. She went pale, then pink, then pale again. "Elijah?" she said, half under her breath. He looked at her for exactly 2 seconds and then turned away, giving her nothing. The judge entered. Lorraine Beckett. Silver hair, black glasses, voice like gravel wrapped in silk. She took her seat, adjusted her robe, and looked around. "Let's begin," she said. It started with documents. Elijah walked through the trust first, signed, witnessed, dated 12 years ago. He explained the clause that made any later deed transfer invalid unless approved by both a medical authority and the original trustee, me. Then he brought out the medical reports. No signs of dementia, no impairment, physically weak, but cognitively sharp. He said it like a scalpel, quick and clean. Then came the recordings. He played snippets, one by one. Rick laughing. "She didn't even read it, like taking candy from a baby." Vanessa. "A mistake, sure, but that house was wasted on her." More clips, more cold truth. Each one a nail in the coffin they had built for themselves. Rick squirmed in his seat. Vanessa tried to whisper something to him, but he swatted her hand away. The room was silent. Finally, Elijah turned to me. "Mrs. Holloway," he said, "do you have anything you wish to say?" I stood. My knees ached, my spine crackled, but I stood, and I pulled a small piece of folded paper from my coat pocket. "I do," I said. Judge Beckett nodded. "This," I said, "is a letter from my husband, Walter Holloway, written 2 months before he died." I unfolded it carefully and read, "If anything happens to me before the good Lord calls you home, I want you to keep the house. It's yours, Marlene. You made it a home long before I ever earned the deed. I never told you enough, but everything I ever built, I built because I knew you'd protect it. I trust no one else, not even Rick if he gets too clever. Hold on to it, because if anyone deserves to have a place to sit when they're tired, it's you." My voice didn't break, not once. I folded the letter, tucked it back in my pocket. Judge Beckett stared at the desk for a moment. Then she spoke. "Mrs. Marlene Holloway did not make a mistake," she said slowly, deliberately. "She was misled, manipulated, drugged, isolated, and stripped of her dignity." She turned to Rick and Vanessa. "This was not confusion. This was not poor communication. This was not a small mistake, as you so eloquently described it on several occasions." She leaned forward. "This was calculated fraud, a deliberate attempt to erase a woman from her own life." Vanessa opened her mouth, but Judge Beckett raised a hand. "I do not want to hear from you. You will have time to speak to your ethics board soon enough." The courtroom went still again. She banged the gavel once. "My ruling is as follows. The deed transfer is null and void. All rights revert to Mrs. Marlene Holloway immediately. Mr. Richard Holloway is hereby stripped of any managerial authority over said property for no less than 3 years, pending further review." Rick's mouth fell open. The judge continued, Mrs. Vanessa Holloway, your involvement constitutes a breach of professional integrity. Your license in real estate will be suspended indefinitely and your name will be submitted for public review in all affiliated industry networks. Vanessa gasped. You can't. Judge Beckett cut her off. I can, and I have. She turned to me once more. And Mrs. Holloway, she said, her tone softening, I am sorry this happened to you, but I am not sorry that you are the one who gets to teach the lesson. And that was it. Gabbled down. Case closed. As I walked out of the courtroom, coat buttoned high and head held higher, Vanessa stood in the hallway, too stunned to cry. Rick leaned against the wall, sweating through his suit. Neither one looked at me. I didn't care. I didn't need their eyes. I had the law, and for once, the law had me. I did not move back into the house. I could have. The court made it mine again, fair and square. The locks were changed, the deed was corrected. Rick and Vanessa were barred from setting foot on the property. But I did not go back there to live. Some walls hold more than memories. Some floors still echo with silence that cuts deeper than noise. And I had spent too many nights in that laundry room, whispering my strength back into existence, to ever sleep under that roof again. So instead, I turned the house into something else. I named it the second home. A safe place for women like me, elderly mothers, widows, caregivers, women who had given everything and been left with nothing, women who were forgotten by their children or cheated out of their peace, or simply too tired to fight one more cruel word at a Thanksgiving table. The first night, we had 3 beds made up. By the end of the month, we had 12 women sleeping in rooms once meant to erase me. We cooked together, cleaned together, shared our pills and pain and stories like old songs. No one was in charge, no one was just a guest. It was our home. Every last Saturday of the month, we hosted a gathering called Stories from the Forgotten Mothers. We set up chairs in the front yard when the weather was kind. We made lemonade and coffee cake and invited anyone who wanted to listen. And we spoke. One by one, soft at first, but with growing clarity, we told our stories. A woman named Bernice spoke about raising 6 children who now only sent birthday texts. Carol had signed over her car to her grandson for insurance reasons and hadn't seen him since. May had lived in a basement for 7 years before her daughter's neighbor called a social worker. Every story felt like mine, and yet, every story reminded me how many of us there were. One day, a journalist from the Chippewa Sentinel came by. I thought she was just curious, but a week later, there it was, in print, front page. She lost her house to betrayal, then gave it back to the women betrayed by blood. They interviewed some of the women, took photos of the rose bushes I had replanted, shot video of us singing old hymns in the kitchen, and under one wide-angle photo of our porch, they quoted me. It's not revenge, it's reclamation. I had that line carved into a wooden plaque. But the real statement, the one that made Vanessa's mouth twist when she saw it in the paper, was a bronze sign I had hung by the front gate. It read, "This is the house of memory. The ungrateful may not enter." We received postcards after that, from as far as Oregon, women writing things like, "I thought I was the only one. Can I come visit, even if I have nothing left? Your story saved me." I kept every card in a box labeled proof. It sits where Rick's TV used to be. Sometimes I sit on the old porch swing, fixed, finally, and think about what would have happened if I had kept quiet, if I had believed their version of my worth, if I had mistaken silence for safety and signed away my life with the same blind trust they depended on. But I didn't. I remembered who I was, and I remembered who raised me. My mother used to say, no matter how hard they try, they can't take your story unless you give it to them. Well, I didn't give it. I kept it. And I passed it on. Now every woman who walks through that door, whether she brings a suitcase or just sorrow, adds her voice to the home. Not a shadow, not a burden, not a mistake, but a chapter. And let me tell you something, child. This book we're writing, it's not quiet anymore. It laughs in the face of shame. It sings louder than guilt. It teaches daughters and sons what their parents were too tired to say out loud. And it ends not with bitterness, but with balance. Justice, even when late, still counts. I do not know where Rick and Vanessa live now. I hear Rick's credit tanked after the court ruling. Vanessa's face was pulled off the Keller Williams office wall and replaced by someone younger and softer spoken. Good. Let them reinvent themselves. But me? I did not need reinvention. I needed recognition. And I got it. Not from strangers, not from the courts, but from the quiet voice inside me that never gave up. The one that whispered, write it down, say it out loud, stand when you're tired. Sign your name in ink they cannot erase. So now, when people ask me what happened, what really happened, I don't say, they tricked me. I say, they called it a small mistake. I, along with the judge, called it justice. Late, but real. And then I offer them coffee. Because the house still smells like safety now. Because I still remember every word. Because I am still here. And this time, no one is sending me away. Thank you for sitting with me through this story. It was not easy to tell, but it was necessary. If this story stirred something in you, if you know someone who's been left behind, underestimated, or forgotten, do not let this be the end. Let it be a beginning. Click subscribe to Grandma True Stories and stay with us. Share this story. Leave a comment. Hit that bell, because when we pass down these memories, we pass down more than pain. We pass down power. And remember, my dear, revenge has no expiration date. Wisdom doesn't shout, it remembers. And when a grandmother speaks, the world finally listens. See you on the porch next time.